Like if a white guy were to make a
Right.
black joke, can they not do that? Do you think it's different?
Well, I think it's definitely different. If Chris Rock makes a joke, if I make a joke, and if a white comedian makes a joke, it is different in varying degrees. What I do know, though, is regardless, and this is from speaking to many comedians who are my mentors and friends, people like Dave Chappelle, there's nothing more hurtful than seeing somebody else taking your joke and using it in a way that you didn't intend it. So like I lived in a world where I genuinely only had the references that I did, and I would enjoy sharing that. And so you craft this set in black rooms all across America, and then you start getting opportunities to perform in mainstream rooms that are predominantly white. And you're doing that material, and you don't realize that the laugh is changing. The laugh is changing from recognition to ridicule. You don't realize that you've almost given people a key to laughing at as opposed to laughing with. And that was a shift that I then had to make in my comedy, where I was like, oh, okay, I'm trying to course correct and figure out what's happening here, because it was something I didn't understand until it was almost too late. And I was like, okay, that's something I promised myself that I would work harder on making sure that never happened again.
You also talked about understanding that history, where it comes from, that black people from America would really want to go back to Africa, or want to go back to the motherland and that type of thing. Obviously in South Africa, very recently, you all have had a very horrible history with apartheid. Is there anything that you've learned about the horrific experience of not just black people, but other minority groups, whether it be Native Americans, Latinos, and whatnot? Anything that you've learned about their story or their history in America that's even surprised you at the level of the horror and the scrutiny and the things that marginalized people have to go through here?
Wow, is there anything that surprised me? Do you mean is there anything that hasn't surprised me? It's tough, especially when you read through it all. Lots of American history is delivered to you on the outside in tidbits, in snippets. You have ideas of it, but I won't lie, I didn't fully know, I didn't understand the complexities. And then you read through it. I remember one of the things that I guess surprised me and shocked me the most was when you come from the African continent, when you are an immigrant, you're prone to believing that all you have to do is behave, and then the world will treat you appropriately. And I remember the first time I discovered that that's exactly what black people in America had tried over and over again. It's why there was a movement of freedom fighters wearing suits. It's why black men in America dressed so dapper the way they did, because they said, I want to show you that I'm acting accordingly, I'm being respectful. And then seeing how even that wasn't enough, going through the stories, whether it was MLK or, whether it was reading stories of, in Oklahoma, reading all of these stories where you realize that it wasn't about what you were doing, it was more about who you are, which was a scary thought to come upon, because you always like to believe that there is something you can do to prevent you from being killed by a policeman, to prevent you from suffering the ills that your parents or your grandparents went through. You like to believe that it is all in your control. And I think one of the most surprising discoveries for me was realizing how far that was from the truth.
Speaking of, the horrible racial turmoil that you kind of, referenced there, let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump's America. You've talked about...
I don't like to call it Donald Trump's America. I think it's
Donald
America.
Trump's presidency.
It's America dealing with Donald Trump.
Well,
it's not his America.
And my next line was from something you said, I think, in an interview with the LA Times. You talked about Trump is really just an antagonist in America's story, is the way you'd phrased it. And I'm curious, in America, oftentimes the excuse is, oh, that was way in the past. That was very long ago.
Right.
South Africa, that excuse may not bear out so well because, it's more recent past. When I was over there, people always say, oh, we're only 20 years into this democratic experiment. That was always a line. Do you think in some ways that the Trump presidency can be seen as a good thing for race in America, in that it exposes kind of rifts that people thought were just gone in the past and didn't exist anymore?
Well, I don't know if it's a good thing. I think good can come from it. That's how I've always lived my life. That's how my mother has taught me to live it. She goes, we can't control what's happening to us, but we can control how we react to it. And so, in many ways, you go, okay, Trump is president. This is the reality we are dealing with. This is the reality the world is dealing with, because it's not just an American issue now. Donald Trump is president, and he has, in many ways, emboldened people who are racist all over America. And so, what has happened, and what good can come from it, in my opinion, is the fact that conversations can no longer be masked. Donald Trump is forcing people to choose. Donald Trump is, in many ways, it's funny because, the phrase was always used during the campaign. People would say, what would it take for people to not vote for Donald Trump? What would it take? And I'm like, well, Donald Trump's going to show you what it'll take. He, step by step, action by action, he slowly tests the resolve of people. And you see people slowly saying, actually, wait, is that what I look like? That's not me. That's not who I am. And as frustrating as it may be for some, they go like, well, why weren't you against him from the beginning? I'm the eternal optimist, which is always going to be my downfall and my gift. And that is, I go, well, Donald Trump is the person who will push people to the point where they do have to make a choice. And it is sad because many people will still fall on the side of bigotry and xenophobia and racism. But there will be many who, seeing Donald Trump for what he is, will then choose to try and not be that. And not everyone may succeed, but I do believe that some people would then go, oh, I don't wish to associate with what that is. I didn't see myself as being that.
For me, I think it's a good thing to always have mentors, especially in your life, and people that you look up to. And it's nice to see he has Donald Trump as, not Donald Trump, Dave Chappelle as a mentor that he looks up to, someone that he likes to become, and not just Dave Chappelle, but also Chris Rock. There's somebody once said that if you wanna become like somebody, always look at the good side of the person, not look at the bad side of the person. Most of the time, we want to be like people, but we tend to criticize them. When you criticize somebody, you never become like that person. That is a fact. You want to be like somebody? Learn not to criticize the person. Learn to appreciate the good that that person can offer to you. Because if you criticize that person, you will never become like that person. That is something that I've learned, and that is something that I've noticed in life, that if you tend to criticize somebody, you will never, ever in your lifetime become like that person. And there's something I watched on one of Dave Chappelle's shows where he talked about how one of the highest person that he fears so much in comedy is none other than Eddie Murphy, because he's good. And one thing that helped him become good was because he saw the good in him, how brilliant he is, and appreciated him. So it is something that we should really tend to copy. And going to the part of comedy in America and comedy in Africa, if you move to America and your audience slightly shifts from more predominantly Africans to interracial audience to mixed audience, sorry, it's also nice to shift the comedy dynamics too. And on the part of Trump always tests people. He wanna get the attention all the time, like with the New York court trial that just happened and the verdicts that just happened. It shows us that there is a lot that we gotta learn as a nation, we gotta learn as people, that even though a person has criminal records or has a felony, it doesn't stop him or her from becoming a president. That is something that is so peculiar with Trump. And that is something that I've noticed. He still has a shot to win, even though he has a verdict. And I say that soon they will revoke his license from owning a firearms or purchasing a firearm. So let's see. But at the end of the day, it's left Americans to look for who love the nation first, second who is patriotic, third who cares about his people and his citizens and want to see them do well and want to see his nation do well. That is the most important thing, irrespective of either it's a Democrat or Republican, somebody that's patriotic, somebody that puts the nation first, America first, somebody that puts its citizens
Given
first,
that you say you're the
somebody
eternal
that puts
optimist,
the
and obviously where
interest of the land
you came from a
and of
background
the
and upbringing
country
where you had to
first.
kind
Let's
of
consider
dabble in
that
all
with
different races,
Trevor
cultures,
now.
and kind of bridge that divide. Any tips or any
Let's
words
consider
of
back with Trevor
encouragement you
now.
can give us now, or for how this society, how here in America, we can move forward in bridging a lot of these racial divides?
Wow, that's a tough one.
That's why I'm
I
a
would say that
journalist.
the biggest thing is to talk about it. It's not easy, but I do know that's one of the most powerful tools you have. And when I say talk about it, I'm speaking to white people, predominantly in America. It's a frightening conversation to have, but it's a conversation that needs to be had, and that conversation is race. That conversation is understanding, the very fiber of the country you are living in. Those conversations need to be had with your friends and family. And it seems like it's impossible. It seems like it's a mountain that can never be climbed. But I do believe we can make inroads. I do believe that as people we can move a conversation forward. But the key is to have that conversation. And I think in many ways social media has done that. I feel like younger people are more in touch with each other than ever before. We are seeing each other in ways that we never saw each other as human beings. Whether it's black people being shot by police in America, whether it's a bomb going off in Mogadishu and seeing the victims, whether it's people in Syria going through chemical attacks, Assad launching attacks on them, whether it's us seeing what's happening in Myanmar with the Rohingya people. I don't think that many of those images would have filtered through to generations that came before us in the same way. There may have been one expose on the New York Times, a big piece, but for the most part, you find that would have blown over. And now we're in a space where we can see each other like never before. In many ways, I always say it feels like we're living through the best time ever because we now have the ability to see how bad things really are, which I know sounds like a paradox, but I feel like that's a hopeful place to be in.
Yeah, I think the lens is there, but I always kind of, maybe coming from my cynical thing, are people looking in the lens? Are people looking and accepting and trying to understand?
Well, I think people are looking. The acceptance is one that I can't necessarily speak to. I do think, though, there is a shift slowly. There will always be people who ignore. There will always be people who turn the blame around. You see it happening in all instances. It doesn't just happen to black people in America where something happens and, they go like, well, why was he running? Or why was he driving that car? Or why was he wearing a hoodie? Or the same thing happens to victims of sexual harassment or assault. We're seeing it now with Harvey Weinstein. People saying, well, why was she in that hotel room? Why was she wearing those clothes? Well, did she really want it? And that's a thing that we have to root out in society, is victim blaming. But what we can't deny is access to those stories does drill into people's minds. There will always be the holdouts. I don't ever think we will get everyone. I don't think society needs everyone to move forward. Oftentimes, you will have the people who are left behind and they're forced to come with. They're always going to be dragging the rear end of society. And then there will be those people who are at the forefront. Most people, I argue, are in the middle, but they're also moving forward. And we have moved forward in society. We've made progress. But that doesn't mean that more progress doesn't need to be made. That's how we live, and so I think having access to that is better than not having access to it, because at least people have to in some ways grapple with what's happening. Whether they agree with it or disagree, they're now grappling with it, which is a space I would rather be in.
Race is a very sensitive topic in America that we tend to shy away from it, and that other countries have gone past it and they don't really see it as a no talk or no discussion topic. They see it as topic that they can discuss about it and be free, and people can express their opinions and their thoughts and mindset about it. But us, we are so scared to talk about it, to discuss about it, in which we shouldn't go. Let's copy the way South Africa has done, especially with ways you see they are free to talk about it, and they are free to talk about it, and they don't really get mad or offended. But in America, people are still super scared to talk about it. Still super scared to bring up topics about it, and it shouldn't be that way at all. You shouldn't be scared to talk about race. You shouldn't be scared to. We shouldn't be scared to talk about anything, to discuss topics like that. It's something that we should be open to to talking about and conversing freely about, and see that there will always be race issues, but let's look past about it. Let's look at things that we are more that we have more in common rather than things that we don't have in common, because what we have in common is greater than what we do not have in common.